Welcome, everybody, to the 2024 NIT Championship preview show. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Make sure if you're going to bet on the NIT Championship, you go to BetMGM, the top sports book for betting on college basketball. You can bet on the Final Four there. Also, check out the Final Four show, preview show that we did earlier today with myself and Dr. J. Gee. Great show. Make sure you check that out. Tomorrow, we'll have an NCAA Women's Final Four preview show. And on Friday, a Survive in Advance, where myself, 1981 national champion Steve Risley from the Indiana Hoosiers, will look ahead to championship weekend Saturday in the Final Four. And guys, Hinkle Fieldhouse was rocking last night as the Indiana State Sycamores ran away from the Utah Utes 100-90 to advance to the NIT Championship game. There, they'll face the Seton Hall Pirates, who dominated the Georgia Bulldogs. I think it's safe to say, if you watch Indiana State and Seton Hall, these are two teams that should have been in the NCAA tournament. These are two teams that could have won games in the NCAA tournament. I think both of them could have been at worst second-round teams. I think possibly Sweet 16, maybe even beyond that. Both teams are very good. Seton Hall beat UConn. You don't have to say much more than that. Indiana State shoots the ball and offensively moves the ball as well as any team in the country. And to watch this game to be played at historic Hinkle Fieldhouse, where the Indiana High School State Basketball Championships were held for years, Oscar Robertson, Bobby Plump, George McGinnis, all these guys rocked Hinkle Fieldhouse. Last night, the Indiana State Sycamores rocked Hinkle Fieldhouse also. So let's look back at last night, and we're going to start off with the first game tonight, which was Utah versus Indiana State. Now, why did Utah lose this game? Why did Indiana State win this game? The Utes defense had been strong in previous NIT wins over Iowa and Virginia Commonwealth. They struggled against one of the most efficient offensive teams in the country. Indiana State shot 60% in the second half, 56.9% for the game, while making 12 of 34 three-pointers. That overshadowed Utah's offense. They put up 90 points. They shot 52.3. They made a school record-tying 17 three-pointers. They made 17 three-pointers. They still couldn't overcome the Indiana State Sycamores. The key stretch of this game was the Utes fell behind early by double digits. They fought back. They tied the game at halftime. And the Utes kept fighting back, even though they found themselves down by as many as 8 in the first 10 minutes of the second half. They managed to cut it to a 5-point Indiana State lead at 71-66 on Gabe Madsen's three-point shot. Indiana State had a quick answer, as Indiana State almost always does. Indiana State super sub Xavier Bledson countered with a three. Then after a Utah miss, the always dependable Julian Larry had a three-pointer rim out, then back in to make it 77-66 with a little over 7 minutes left to go in the game. That forced Utah to call a timeout. The Utes never recovered from that. Indiana State went on to win the game 100-90. And I think the matchup anybody would have wanted in the NIT was Indiana State and Seton Hall, because quite simply, they both got robbed not being in the NCAA tournament. Georgia looked completely out of sorts. They were kind of the Cinderella of the NIT. They weren't seeded, and they had played well the last 3 games to get to this point. But Georgia this season has been very hit or miss on three-point shooting. When they fire on all cylinders, they can beat anybody. But when they're off, they can't. And Seton Hall last night got off to a hot start. They put a lot of pressure on Georgia to get something going from the three-point range, but the Bulldogs shooters struggled. Georgia went 2 of 15 from three-point range in the first half, which allowed the Pirates to build a 17-point lead. The Bulldogs had a little bit more success from 3 in the second half, but it was far from being enough to even make this game interesting. So that brings us to an NIT championship game between Seton Hall and Indiana State. The great thing about this weekend, guys, is you've got UConn, Purdue. You've got a very entertaining Final Four to look at. You've got South Carolina, UConn, Iowa, and Caitlin Clark in the women's college basketball Final Four. This is a great weekend for college basketball, and it starts off tomorrow night with Indiana State at Hinkle Fieldhouse, where they're going to have a huge advantage with the crowd. The Sycamore fans were crazy. And I mean, the thing is this. I went to Indiana State in 1987, just so everybody knows. I remember going to Indiana State games where the biggest crowd was like 3,000 or 4,000. That's changed. The Indiana Sycamores are red hot. Indiana basketball as a whole is red hot, not the Hoosiers, but Purdue's in the Final Four with a roster that's 10 or 11 Indiana guys. You've got the Indiana State Sycamores playing for the NIT Championship at home, basically at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Seton Hall has beaten Butler a couple times this year at Hinkle Fieldhouse, or once. So they know the lay of the land. They're not going to be intimidated. They play a big-time schedule. You got the UConns of the world, Marquette, Creighton, all in the Big East. It's a top-heavy conference this year, but the competition is very good. Indiana State started this tournament off. They struggled a little bit in the first half against SMU, were behind in the second half, came back to win 101-92. Then they took on the Big Ten's Minnesota Golden Gophers. The Sycamores dominated that game 76-64. Then you had the UC Bearcats. The Cincinnati Bearcats were a team from the Big 12 that was a very good team. Indiana State, behind Robbie Avila's three-pointer with about a minute left, kind of pulled away to win the game 85-81. Of course, last night, 190 over Utah. Seton Hall's really only test was the first round of the NIT against St. Joseph's, where they won 75-72 in overtime. They beat North Texas 72-58. They blew out UNLV 91-68. Last night, manhandled Georgia 84-67. Not a huge championship game history for either one of these teams. Indiana State, of course, is known for reaching the 1979 NCAA tournament final with Larry Bird. This is the Sycamores' first NIT final. Seton Hall won the NIT in 1953 when a lot of people considered it the national championship, and they reached the 1989 NCAA tournament final, falling to Michigan at the buzzer, basically. And there were some bad calls there also. When we break this game down between Indiana State and Seton Hall, I think the three keys to winning this game are control the tempo, especially if you're Seton Hall. Indiana State likes to push it with their five-out offense. They like to spread the floor, open and find the open man, and shoot away. Seton Hall can stick the Sycamores in a Big East-style meat grinder by rebounding and taking care of the ball. Indiana State's not a great rebounding team. Seton Hall is. If Seton Hall can limit their turnovers to under 10 or 11, they're going to have a really good chance. The other thing with controlling the tempo is defending the three-point line. It's been a lot of hit and miss for the Pirates this year. Sometimes they're on, sometimes they're off. Indiana State's almost always on. They shoot 38.3% from deep, which ranks 11th in the nation. And how much helping Badaako has to do defensively, how crisp he is with it, could loom large. When he goes over, under screens, through screens, does he make the right choice? He's the man that's got to really defend this. The other thing is physicality. This will be a true road environment for Seton Hall. The good news is the Hall's nucleus is 3-0 at Hinkle. They beat Butler there twice over the last 2 years. The bad news is their last two road games ended in blowouts. But this group did win at Butler this year. They won at Providence. They won at Seton Hall. So they kind of got to put the armor on and go to war. They got to slow the game down, and they've got to make this a grinder of a game. When we compare the backcourts, few teams have a player who can defend Richmond for Seton Hall. Indiana State is not one of those teams. They don't have a man that can defend him. Dawes is scorching hot in the NIT, averaging 20 points, shooting 44% from deep. In the backcourt, I think the edge goes to Seton Hall. In the front court, you got Avila, who's goggles, highly skilled. You know, they're calling him Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but he can score from anywhere on the court. He's almost a point forward. He almost runs Indiana State's offense at times, and he passes the ball as well as any big man in the sport. Davis and Bediako are less flashy, but they are as gritty as they come. But if Avila is on, I give the advantage of the front court to the Indiana State Sycamores. The bench to me is even. There's not a lot on the bench, but you saw the effect Xavier Bledson can have on a game. And Seton Hall's got nice contributions from sophomore guard Jaquan Sanders in the NIT. Six-man Isaiah Coleman missed Tuesday's game due to a lingering illness. We don't know if he's going to be available Thursday night or not. Now, my prediction is this has all the hallmarks of a great basketball game, including two rising star coaches. Seton Hall has the experience. All seniors and post-grads who can draw on wins over UConn and Marquette this year. This is going to be a close game. Right now, Indiana State is favored by 1.5 points. The simple fact that they're favored by 1.5 points will tell you how much Vegas values the home court advantage basically they're going to have at Hinkle Fieldhouse. I think it's a close game. I think this is a bad matchup stylistically for Indiana State. But I also think this Indiana State team is special. It's a shame they didn't get to the tournament. Same with Seton Hall. But Sycamore fans are drawn to this team. They're drawn to Coach Josh Schertz. Hopefully he stays because he can build something special in Terre Haute. You may have a point where Purdue and Indiana State are the two best programs consistently in the state of Indiana if Coach Schertz stays. So when I look at this game, I'm going to go with emotion here. I'm going to go with the home court, 12, 15,000 Sycamore fans. Robbie Avila gets on fire. Ryan Conwell plays well. You know, this is a loaded team, at least the first 5 or 6 guys. They can all shoot the three. They don't defend well. Seton Hall defends well, but my question is, will Seton Hall be able to knock shots down? I think Indiana State wins this game 76-74. They covered a 1.5-point spread, and then they'll have a banner to raise at Holman Center in Terre Haute, Indiana, which they haven't raised since, 1979, when they were a regional champion and made it as an NCAA runner-up. Either way, guys, this is going to be a great basketball game. This may be the best basketball game of this week and weekend. And I know you got 2 different Final Fours coming up. And make sure you check out our men's Final Four preview show. We'll have a women's Final Four preview show tomorrow live at noon. You can follow me on X at Grueling Truth. If you're an Indiana State Sycamore, hit that like, subscribe. There's not too many places that have been talking about Indiana State all year. We have at the Grueling Truth. We will into next year, whether coach stays or not. We may even have an Indiana State weekly show next year, so stay tuned on that. But for now, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been watching and listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.